and welcome to, I think, the second last group of sessions for Think Tank. Today we're going to be looking at, I guess, SelfService BI, data discovery, best practice. So really looking at, I guess, what it is, what are the challenges that people face, trying to enable self-service in their BI deployments and implementations. And I guess some of the practices that we've seen, that we've learned as well through time. And the key thing in looking at, I guess, some of these best practices and what we do is really, it's not one size fits all. It's really looking at what combination of things is going to be best fit for your organisation, because there's a lot of different dependencies and a lot of things to consider when, I guess, implementing self-service BI, which we'll cover as part of today. To those who don't know me, I look after EMEA for Yellowfin, so I'll get the boring stuff out the way. So when we talk about self-service BI, what are we actually talking about? We want to essentially empower users to build their own reports, their own dashboard, their own content when they want and how they want. And the when they want is really part of the key thing here. The business has questions that potentially need answers straight away, and you want to enable them to get their own answers as soon as they need them. And that's really the key part of self-service BI. You need to basically provide that just-in-time information requirements to the end user in a way that they can easily consume. And that's what we're talking about here. What is it? It's complementary to your existing capability. It is not the answer to everything. Let's just give our users exposure to all the content, and away they go. They can get all the information they need. It's not that. It's going to complement your existing BI deployment. And what it also does is really extends the reach of your tool set. I mean, user adoption is the biggest thing, those who kind of administer BI systems, in trying to enable users and get them out there and get them using the system. And self-service BI that users want to engage with and use is going to proliferate throughout an organisation. And that's, I think, what we've read, and this is from a number of different organisations, that end-user adoption is one of the key measure for successful BI deployments, and self-service BI is a part of that and can really assist that adoption rate. This is a Gleanster quote saying 91% of the companies desire to generate on-demand reports, and I'm surprised the other 9% that don't desire that. But it's one of the top reasons that invest in BI, not just on-demand corporate standard documents, but information when they want it, how they want it, answering the questions that they need in their daily life. Because that's what we're talking about with kind of on-demand. What it isn't, as I said, it doesn't replace the corporate document. It doesn't replace the standard of reporting that people are used to, the people that need to consume on a monthly, on a weekly basis. As I said earlier, it's certainly not a one-size-fits-all. What might work at a previous organisation is not going to work at your next organisation. And as your teams grow and different departments and enterprise might need different needs depending on, I guess, the users and what their information requirements are. And what it isn't, and this is a big thing which I'll touch on a bit later, is IT losing control. We often get losing control of their information, maybe putting it in the hands of these business users who don't know what they're doing, and losing that sense of what it is in their high performance kind of BI initiative. So if done right, it's certainly not that. It's actually the opposite. Why do we want to do it? Obviously, it actually will reduce the burden of IT. If you can enable these business users and users to answer their questions as they need, they don't have to go through standard IT requests. They can do it themselves. They can get confidence of their system. It'll not only reduce the bottlenecks, but it'll grow user development and adoption throughout the deployment. It really extends the reach of BI, which once again user adoption is a key part of. And it also provides for an agile development cycle that allows people to keep developing, keep answering questions, and keep getting the information that they need. This is a Gartner quote from, I think, about 5 years ago, saying that this market is growing at 30% in the next 5 years. I think they've actually increased that in their kind of recent discussions. But so it's certainly an area that people are seeing that people want to get involved with, and particularly, I mean, from a Yellowfin perspective, we're a software tool that's more positioned for a business user with the ease of use and ease of getting your content. So we're generally seeing more and more departments and businesses come to us to go, we want to enable this area, as opposed to, I guess, where it's traditionally been IT. So we're seeing more and more kind of in this market, but it's a case of kind of manage that effectively. So what's driving kind of this need from a data discovery perspective? One, we're seeing, I guess, greater access to data, and Robin touched on this in terms of the data that's now available and the rings of it, but we're talking about, I guess, multiple data sources of information that people want to bring together. The unstructured information, we're talking about the social data that they want to tie in, their Facebook information with their sales data, and what's my ads doing here, and wanting to bring that content all together with their traditional finance information, for example. Mobile's a big part of that, having all this information on mobile, wanting to connect, where are my events, where are things happening to, my standard kind of operational database level. And with the advent of these databases that provide more processing power, it's being able to go down to the lowest level, with one click, with one touch, and be able to see this greater depth of data to understand that. So where does a lot of the challenges lie in a successful kind of self-service kind of BI deployment? And this is a survey from the BI Leadership Forum saying, look, essentially, a higher percentage of self-service initiatives are not performing as to be expected. They're really, struggling to find the balance of providing a system that's going to enable their users with the issues that it sometimes causes and the issues that it presents when you're doing that. This is the biggest thing we've seen. I mean, I've been part of, I've worked in kind of big organisations in particular with a lot of red tape to potentially get the reports you need. We've seen that the business has a request, it'll go to IT, they'll check the requirements, they'll check with the business, they'll go through the process, they'll check it, it'll go to dev, it'll go to test, it'll go to prod, it'll finally get promoted, and then the question isn't relevant anymore. The IT and the business kind of view of how long this takes can sometimes be very different from the same survey as the previous results. And you often, particularly in larger organisations, see this kind of us versus them scenario, and it's that creates a lot of the problem in terms of having an efficient self-service BI capability. So what are, I guess, some of the key, I guess, best practices, that we, I guess, tend to see in this space? One, I guess, key area is to really think about enterprise-wide planning and thinking about what's going to be the greater effect of this. I mean, often we see organisations start potentially with a departmental rollout because we want to start with our marketing team, we want to give them the ability to look at their demographics, to look at their sales information in an ad hoc basis because they're the ones creating these plans. That's really worked, so let's actually bring that out to the finance team, bring that out to HR. And that's where potentially it gets a bit lost as you've got different groups and different organisations. So really thinking about when you're starting to roll this out, what is going to be the enterprise effect and planning for that ahead. And that might be from a potential of the combination of your static reports and the more dynamic content. But also really thinking about, all right, how is my information and data structured so I can really enable this? So one example is, you might have a sales organisation and you want to present your ad hoc sales analysis data and you want to start with Victoria. I want to then potentially have one set of data. I want to maybe limit my Victorian users in the background so as soon as they run reports, they only see their data. And if that's successful, I want to roll that across to New South Wales and across to the rest of Australia. So thinking about, instead of creating a data set for each state, am I going to have one data set and everyone can be filtered based on the data that they see. So therefore it's kind of lower maintenance in the long run. I'm creating one set that can then go out to everyone. So really thinking about how the data is structure in your organisation, and thinking about then, if I want to maintain that in the best possible way, what the real effect is going to be. Knowing users, and this is, I think, a real, a key thing, and this is where it's very, very different from organisation to organisation in terms of the ability of your users and their knowledge. You often see, I guess, the bundle of, I guess, your consumers versus your producers. So the people who are just going to consume information, get what they need, get on with their job, versus the people who are going to start to create content and build that, and sometimes call the, I guess, the power user versus the casual user. What we tend to see, I guess, three groups. One is, I guess, that casual user that just gets their report on a monthly basis, does what they need to do with their jobs, and gets on with it. So that's always going to be that type of user in potentially a large organisation. But then you've got, I guess, a user in the middle where you want to provide the interactivity. So potentially you want to provide a dashboard that's going to give them every cut and every slice that they're asking on a regular basis. So you're setting up, a pre-canned area of all the questions that they're going to ask. So they don't need to go back to the DB. They've got everything in the one spot that they ask those questions. So it's real interactive users. And then you've got, the small group that are, savvy with the data, that's going to be starting to create the content and building that stuff up, and potentially kind of spread that out. So I think there are three different groups potentially to look at. Potentially in that middle group with the interactivity, we often get the question that you've got, say, 4 or 5 key dimensions that you look at on a regular basis, but I want to add this one extra here because we look at that every quarter. It's often thinking about, what's going to be the most effective in that area. So if you're doing a report, with 5 key dimensions on a daily basis, there's no use adding the 6 if it's kind of once a year or once a quarter. So thinking about what's going to have the biggest effect, because if you've got one user needing that versus the other 100 using the regular stuff. So really thinking about what their needs are in that context. This is, I guess, Gartner's kind of self-service kind of BI sweet spot, and I think it does really hit where they see self-service, and I think we see it as well. So having that interactivity, between that kind of data discovery side with kind of in the middle, and obviously that kind of grey, dark area being the data dump and Excel, and unfortunately Access, which we still see today out there, which is a very, very scary thing. But just in what is the ideal sweet spot from a self-service perspective. Next, I guess one thing to look at from a best practice perspective is, the right amount at the right time. And this is, I think, a key, particularly when you're, I guess, starting a self-service initiative. You don't want to overwhelm your user base too soon. If you ask the business, what do you want? They'll say everything. So I always recommend have a think about what they want, present it to them. They can always add things in because they'll always do that. So think about, you're getting users that aren't necessarily tech savvy potentially. You don't want to just put in your whole fact table and every dimension to go have a list of 80 different objects that they then can select. It's really thinking about the right amount that's going to suit their purpose, and then building that up as the confidence gets greater. So really thinking about what do they need? What do they need in terms of kind of aggregation of information? What do they need in terms of limitation of data sets? So that might be, I'm just going to allow you in the university to focus on the science because that's your department. I'm going to allow you in the sales organisation to focus on Queensland because that's your area. And you limit their data set so it's more manageable and it's more meaningful for their job. And potentially as their confidence picks up and they get used to the system, they understand their needs are going to grow and you can start introducing more to them. So really thinking about giving them what they need and then growing from there. This is, I think, true for any BI deployment, whether it be self-service or anything, but getting your data right, particularly when you're going to enable non-technical users, it's so critical. And the first part of that is having a structure that's very, very clear and very, very easy that a non-tech person, particularly in self-service, is going to understand. Like yourself, you might understand the database fields and understand what every average positive grade calculation is, that's no problem. But to the end user trying to do an average positive grade calculation, which one do I use, how do I use it, which is the right way? So really kind of thinking about, and it's one that, unfortunately, when you're doing a big project, sometimes simple things like description on objects are left out because you've got no time for it. But when it comes down to it, that's a really, really key component of being able to clearly explain to an end user when you're not around exactly what that object is, exactly what calculation is being used. Having it clearly labelled. Having unique labels, that's one key thing that I see. You get a list of objects and they have the same naming convention, bar a 1 or a 2 next to it. To an end user that doesn't understand that, it's got to be crystal clear as to what that is. And having those things in place, from that perspective. Structuring the data right. And this is there's a few, areas of metadata to think about. So once again, looking at the structures that's, I think, relevant to your end users, but also being aware of, we're seeing more and more of people bringing in other data sources. So obviously part of what we're doing with the CSV import is, getting these requests for more data coming in. And I guess structuring it in such a way that your users know how to combine that data effectively, and they understand that when they're bringing in my HR information against my third source of information, this is the ID you're supposed to kind of draw the information on. So understand that it's structured the right way that's going to facilitate the type of information that they're talking about. And as I mentioned, limitations on data sets, depending on their needs, can be a good way to structure it right for them at the first instance as well. Speed and response. Now, it's one of the, the key things, once again, for any BI deployment, but particularly with self-service, you want to get that confidence straight away, potentially even when they're on their own doing it themselves, and having that, speed and the query return in the amount of time that makes sense for the business is really, really critical. It's all about that confidence, and especially when it's first deployed, and then it's going to grow throughout the organisation. All of the objects working, and what I mean by this, if you're presenting your metadata layer and you've got 30 objects, you want them all to work together. You don't want to think, well, this dimension only works with this measure, but if I combine it with this, it's going to create a join, it's going to multiply this out by the number of... You want to make sure that all the objects work together, because you're not always standing over the shoulder saying you shouldn't use these two together. I've seen that in the past, but making sure that everything works together so that if they're on their own, if they pull in every object, yes, they might bring in 10 years worth of data, it might take half an hour to come back, but it's going to work. Part of that is training, which I'll kind of get to a little later. And of course, the accuracy of data. It's a simple one, but once again, the confidence and allowing this to grow and allowing them to share this with their colleagues and proliferate throughout an organisation, having that speed and accuracy is really, really critical. Number 6, having a playground to really build and grow, and where we've seen this successful and people really using it is having a space that people can actually start to play, start to create their content, build their reports out, essentially. And we've seen this in different ways. Some organisations have a specific development environment that their power users, their creators can build to their heart's content. Others have an area in their production environment which you can save and create content which is visible to only themselves and their group, which works. We often get, how do I separate this out? How do I know that I'm walking into a meeting with my corporate document versus something that someone's created? We've seen the use of kind of watermarks or labelling. So your corporate standard documents all have the header, all have their watermark. Now they've been ticked off by IT, versus the guys who are creating their own content and bringing it in. So being able to allow a place where you can grow your confidence and build your reports. Also thinking about a way to facilitate the promotion of content, because you're going to get power users hopefully that are creating reports and dashboards that the whole organisation is going to use. You want them to share them with their colleagues. You want it to be used and throughout the organisation. So thinking about an easy mechanism to go, look, I see this report's being used by your whole team. Let's promote this as the company standard and make this available to everyone. So having a facility which you can potentially promote this content, go through the standard checks and balances that your IT department does, and easily promote that. Because one, it's meaning that meaningful content that these guys are using is being used out there. But once again, builds confidence in the users who are creating information for the whole organisation, and it's going to then spread that acceptance of the self-service BI application. Make the tools easy, and it's once again a simple one, but thinking again, it's with self-service, we often see it's the business user in mind, and making it very, very easy to build their content and create their content. And obviously it's something we try to do with Yellowfin, so it's at the forefront of our mind that when we design the interface and where we've gone from, 6.3 to 7, and those who've gone across from one to the other have seen the report builder and hopefully seen what we try to do to reduce the steps, to preview the content as it's coming along, to make it hopefully a seamless exercise for the business user to create the content. But it's also ensuring that they can find what they want. Making sure you're not just giving them that information for information's sake. So you've got search facilities within there to find the reports, to find the content. The metadata is built not just around the objects within your structure, but also the reports they want to look at, and if they want to search other people's playgrounds or however you want to set it up, that's really going to facilitate to make it as easy as you can for your end users. And really, I guess, the last item, which I think is the biggest item when it comes to self-service BI, is training. And it is often the one that once you've got your system, it's fantastic, it's ready to go, that's kind of tacked on the end. Now, this, from the BI Leadership Survey, was the biggest challenge that organisations faced. It was about 250 organisations that were surveyed. This was the biggest issue for them. And it's certainly in two parts. One, which I think is the easy part, is teaching users how to use the tools that you give them. So teaching them how to use, whether it be Yellowfin or it's hopefully not something else, but teaching them how to use that to get the best out of their BI system. But I think the more important thing is really understand the data that you're giving them. So really, not just understanding this is the data, these are the calculations, but how to then interpret that information. How to then create calculations, how to then derive the information that they need that's going to improve their jobs and their type of analysis. So that's an area that we see that's often missed. People get trained up on the tools, on potentially the training data set that comes with it, but the most effective training that I've seen is when you actually train users on their actual data and using the content that you're going to provide for them, because straight away they get association with that content. They understand those objects, those calculations that they've seen in spreadsheets, that they've seen in their reports, and they can straight away provide feedback, but also they get an understanding on how to calculate things. When they're creating the visualizations, they understand, look, I know what my cost effect on my sale, I know those numbers, but actually I can see it like this, I can see a correlation between the campaigns that we're running. So using that data and using the information to train them, I think is really, really critical as part of any kind of self-service kind of BI initiative. And really, that's I guess some of the key things that I wanted to kind of cover from a high level today. As I said, it's not a one-size-fits-all, and it could be some of those elements that you use. Some of them might not be as applicable. I know from larger to smaller scale organisations, those needs do change quite a bit. But really thinking about, I guess, all those things, and if you're going to enable these users, you try to think about all the varying aspects of that and knock-on effects. Because once again, you want that adoption, and that's the whole point of having the BI system. You want them to make better decisions, answer their questions quickly in the right way, and this is one part of, I think, enabling that. So with that, is there any questions?